I'm going to use View to create the foreground trees for the matte shot. I'm choosing a summer cherry tree out of the library, and I'm just going to quickly position the 3D camera, just eyeball it into place, get the camera to somewhat match the angle that we are implying in the matte painting. There's a terrain editor in View as well, and it allows you to create all types of terrains and sculpt them, scale them, do whatever you want basically. On the right you can see a little rendering that constantly updates a shaded view with lighting of what you have going on in your perspective in your camera view. This is the terrain editor. You can see that you can rotate the terrain, take a look at it from all angles, sculpt, dig, raise, do all types of things to it. I'll come back into the interface here and rotate the terrain, try and get something that's kind of similar to what I had going in the matte painting. In the terrain editor you'll notice the colors. The colors are not a shader, the colors are just showing the topography of the terrain. Showing you what's taller than what, and in regard to the pieces of your terrain. So I'm just continuing to dig into the terrain. I'm trying to get a steep face on the one left side of the whole terrain so that it closer mimics our concept art. This is a atmosphere editor. You can quickly load an atmosphere from the View library, and what it gives you is this. It gives you a lighting scenario, gives you a coloration for the the entire environment. In this case, it's kind of a bluey gray at the top, and it's kind of warm haze at the bottom. And it gives you a sun, intensity, color, and position. Now I'm going to create a little cube here, just so that the sun casts a shadow on this tree. I don't want this tree in direct sunlight. I want to have have it look like it does in the concept art. Swing the sun around. You see the sun there in red. Overall, I just want to give you an idea of how View can be used as a tool for matte artists. I'm not by any means teaching you how to use View, but I just want to show you the possibilities. In time. Okay, so I'm just gonna save this rendering out and open it up in Photoshop. It comes across with an alpha channel, which is great because, as you know, tracing, cutting out trees from photographs is pretty time consuming. It's a low res render, so I'm just scaling up the render really quickly just to see if my proportions are correct. Later on I'll do a higher res render, but because there's a lot of geometry in these trees and terrains in View, I just want to keep it to a minimal. Let's see what I can create here, see if it's going to do the job for me. Looks like we need to scale the tree up. Maybe the terrain is a good fit. Let's see if we can make some adjustments. I'll go back into View and just scale the tree up a little bit, a little vertically, a little bit in X, Y, and Z. In View you can also create what are called ecosystems. I'll get to that in just a bit, but I'm just rotating the tree around here, try and get it to be a little more picturesque, see if we can see a few more of the branches, and also keep the left side open up since we don't want to cover up the palace in the shot. We want it to be very much like the framing that we had in the concept art. So on these terrains in view, you can create an ecosystem. And this ecosystem is a way that you can, it's a tool in which you can take a bunch of trees and plants from a library, a dry bush, a seaweed, etc. And you can set their scale and their presence, and you can populate an ecosystem so that all these bushes and plants are randomly generated, they're randomly dispersed over your entire terrain. The scale can be changed in relationship to one another, and also its presence. The higher the presence, the more often that type of plant will occur within this ecosystem. So once you hit populate, the ecosystem will populate. If you don't have enough trees, all you have to do is increase its density and repopulate. The OpenGL shader, the OpenGL render shows us what we have, and as well in here you can increase its scale or change its orientation. The great thing about the ecosystems is that the plants are very randomly placed quickly. There are ways that you can control the randomness with shaders, noise shaders, different types of turbulence and all that stuff, but if you really want a quick and dirty randomness, this is what it gives you, along with the alpha channels. Now I have a real simple lighting model set up here. I'm not using GI lighting, so it's pretty flatly lit, especially since we did put that cube in there. But again, I'm just going to try and get the massing. So bring it into Photoshop and scale it up, and see if we're in the ballpark regarding scale of the scale of the tree and of the terrain with its ecosystem. Now the reason why I didn't put the tree in the ecosystem is I wanted to place the tree precisely. And currently with this version of Vue, you're not able to precisely place one individual plant within an ecosystem. So I just left it as its own entity, as its own object, and that allows me to scale it, tilt it, rotate, do all types of things to it. We want a random variety of plants in there, but some of the plants look nicer than others, so we'll just increase the number of times the nicer plants appear. And tweaking their scale also allows you to manually tweak the masses and its appearance of randomness. Because if you set some of these plants smaller and some of them quite a bit larger, like in the magnitude of 2 or 4 times larger, then you do end up with a more random look. And though, you know, it may not be completely biologically correct for this function in the dark corner of the matte painting, it's completely acceptable. I'm just going to pull up a quick shader for this terrain. There's a grass and rock shader in their library that is a good starting point. And the grass is separate from the rock within the shader. Together they make one shader, but you can control them each separately. The great thing about these shaders in View is that you have a great amount of control of the individual elements. You can, for example, say you want the grass to grow only on the horizontal surfaces, and then only the vertical surfaces have exposed rock. You can do the same thing with snow and all types of different parts of your shader structure. So with this summer cherry tree, I want to try and make it appear a little thinner, a little more dainty, just so that we don't have quite the solid mass that it is right now. So I'm going to scale it up a little bit, tweak its position, and then with these trees in View, you can also go in to the tree element themselves and tweak the values, like the radius of the diameter, I should say, of the tree trunk, the length of branches, and stuff like that. So the current rendering looks like so. As I said, the tree is a little more dainty, little more transparent in places. Not quite so full of leaves and branches as it used to be. And the terrain is looking quite full with plants extruding off the surface. Once again, we'll just bring it back into Photoshop, scale it up. As we get toward this point in time, I tend to take note more of how much I'm scaling up the object, just so I have a better indication of what resolution I'll want to render it at later. I'll turn off the tree from the concept art and see just how this guy looks in here. I like the fact that at the top of the frame we see a little bit of the sky color in the mountains showing through the leaves. I'm just putting a tad bit of Gaussian blur on the tree, just to soften it up so it doesn't look so hard-edged like typical CG does. Tweak the colors, mainly the brightness and contrast of it. Ultimately, we want this tree to sit in there as a foreground element, not be too distracting. Therefore, I want to make it dark, but because it's such a hazy scene, making it too dark may feel a little unnatural. So I'm going to try and address some of those leaves. The leaves on that particular tree are texture mapped on many planes. What you usually have is a large plane that may carry anywhere from 20 to 30 leaves on it. And if that plane is at an angle that is tangent to the line of view of the camera, then you don't really see the leaves themselves. All you really see is a flat line. So I'm just going to try and tweak the tree, see what I can do, maybe scale it, rotate it. Just do whatever you can to get a slightly more picturesque view, picturesque render of that particular tree. So in the tree editor, the plant editor, you can, on the right side there, you can change the length and the width, randomness, flexibility, curl, almost every aspect of the leaves within the tree. So that's a bit better. I'm just going to bring that into Photoshop. And paste it over the old one. Now, since this is more successful ecosystem and more picturesque view of the tree, I rendered this rendering at a higher res. So as you can see when I zoom in here, compare the two, the higher res rendering has nicer edges. And even though I blurred the previous render, you can tell the difference in render quality. So this is, we're going to call this good for now. We'll come back later on and readdress this with some nicer lighting. Okay, so let's just hop back into View really quick, and I'll show you how with the atmosphere editor you can actually enable breeze on these trees and bushes. You can get these, you can get your vegetation to move around and adjust its intensity by percentage. The higher the intensity, the more the plants or the trees are going to sway in the breeze. And you have this little preview here on the right of a little tree, of a little plant. And if you change the uniformity and the turbulence around, you can get atmosphere editor might want to be a little bit on the low side because the scale of the tree is larger than this plant. It may appear here that this preview shows that the plant isn't moving so much, but you will notice the movement in the tree just because of its size.